We're joined this morning by Mr. Pt1, who is a leadership consultant. Thank you for coming on again today.
Always a pleasure.
Well, in time past, you've spoken about how leadership should function. I think I remember one of them when you said that they really need to move from this patriarchal mode and get into a separate mode wherein the people will have a say, and not that when the people say certain things, or they may think, no, you can't say negative things. But do you see us achieving some of those objectives that you highlighted in the past, lately?
Well, in some areas, yes, but not too much more. I mean, actually, I think the way we've had, this is almost getting the 100 days of government, and we've had a situation whereby we're still operating in the same old mode, whereby government is the center and the Father Christmas and the focus of everything. So you find out we are running a system whereby it's almost as if the leadership of the nation does not recognize that it leads the people, but thinks that it's an administration. And there are two different things. And I've always said that's one of the biggest flaws in terms of our system. And I wouldn't necessarily put the blame on the current leadership, but I would expect that as we're changing, and which was one of the mantras of the government that came in, change would also begin with a change of perspective of what it means to lead a people. As I was coming in the vehicle this morning, I was discussing with my colleague, and I said to him, the first thing a leader's #1 job is to lead the people, to give the people an impression and an idea of where we intend to go, what we intend to become, and how we as a people are becoming it together. As the Chinese sage said, that with the best leaders, when all is done, the people will say we did it ourselves. Now, instead, we find out that we're still back to the same structure whereby we're trying to find out what are the president's ideas. And because we're not too clear at what the ideas of where government is going is, we ourselves are not mobilized to be part of what you would call a revolution, a change in the people.
Isn't government trying to change that mindset, how things were done previously, and just and bring, well, in the manner of speaking, perhaps a new order? Now we haven't seen ministers come in and then just trying to understudy certain things, get proper information on what the true state of things are, and then they eventually come in and begin to drive those policies, he says.
I think actually fundamentally that approach is relatively flawed, because there's a limit to, ministers are not an addendum to government. Ministers are supposed to be part of a government's own strategy to create an agenda. And to create an agenda that's effective, Noel Tichi said the biggest challenge facing leaders in the 21st century is to have more leaders at all levels. Now, fundamentally, the idea of proper ministers are people who should help shape a diverse government agenda coming together to a whole. A civil service, for example, is fundamentally a structure designed to support the agenda created by political heads. That's why we've always had a situation. Now, what you have as a situation is that when you therefore do not have ministers, in the last 100 days, if you look about it, you will find out that you really cannot see significant policies as a group coming out of government, because those who should have generated the policies, the ministerial, the cabinet, which is not a luxury in any nation. I mean, if you watch Britain, as soon as the prime minister comes into office, over the week, by the end of the week, almost all the top ministers have been appointed, including undersecretaries. The reason is because the agenda has to be set, and the people need clarity. In fact, I told someone once that you'll be amazed that even in a dictatorial government, you get results when clarity is there in terms of the direction. And right now, there is actually, as far as most ministries are concerned, no clear-cut direction of an agenda that is being driven, except we would say the manifesto. But the manifesto itself is just a promise.
And it goes back to what you just highlighted by saying sometimes the people try to look at the leader and see the direction of the leader for them to key in. Yes. Just yesterday, we were talking about most of the states in the country. For the first time, we're getting to see states not appointing their cabinets.
Exactly.
Because it would seem as if they're all looking towards the center.
Yes. The center is now giving us an impression that that is actually the norm. And in fact, at the end of the day, if you can't do without ministers for 100 days, then we might as well do without them for the next 4 years, because effectively it means that they were not a key part of government. Basically, if you ask me, for example, to Minister for Education, it probably would have been better if I came in to the Minister of Education with an agenda. And let me say this, which is an issue that we seem to miss a lot in Nigeria. The reality of it is that leaders are ultimately judged by the positives, not by the negatives. Every great leader has had negatives. I've looked in history, you'll find that. Alexander the Great was a man whose temper was horrible. In anger, he wiped out a whole city, the city of Thebes. But we don't remember him for wiping out the city of Thebes. We remember him for all the achievements he did. So ultimately, while it's true that it's nice for government to find out what the structure of things are, to try and get a few things in order, what's more important is for government to set us a vision and a target. Then those in the civil service can buy into it. Those of us on the streets who run our own businesses and have nothing to do with government or occasional deal with government can say, okay, this is the idea. For example, I'm into training and development and capacity building. I'll be able to say, okay, fine. If this is the nation we're trying to build, then this is the capacity we need to set in place. But when I have to wait for 100 days or 200 days, because it's not yet been done, for that agenda to be not just set, but articulated effectively and communicated to me, then it creates for me a drift. And the lethargy, one problem with lethargy is that it's like when you watch football. If you've ever watched a football game, when a team lets its guard down and reduces its tempo, and then the other team starts playing well, it becomes very difficult to suddenly raise your tempo.
Especially when they concede the goal early.
Well, exactly. Then to raise your tempo becomes a problem. And the challenge is on May 29, when this government came into place, this nation was full of enthusiasts, people who believed that we were about to start a revolution. One of the weaknesses, and I hope it's not late, is that you didn't need to change the whole world, but you needed to give us something that gave us a reason for optimism that we are moving forward to somewhere that you're establishing, even if it's just an I have a dream idea.
And it brings us to momentum.
Yes.
You know, now, May 29 was a fantastic moment for everyone, for the continent, for everyone watching from outside the continent. Everyone expected us to have moved from a particular stage to another one. But for first 100 days, even though the party at the center now says, well, we're not believers of 100 days in office, what did they miss out in all of that?
The truth is that you don't have to be a believer in 100 days in office. 100 days in office happen. That's the truth about it. It's not a matter of faith. Someone wrote a book called The First 90 Days. The idea behind the book of The First 90 Days is not so much because you make so many changes in the first 90 days, but in 90 days you set a pathway and a direction. And once people can see that the pathway and direction has been set, then they say, okay, so this is what is expected of us. Now, what they missed out, and that's a fact which they can still hopefully adjust, is that in change management, there are certain things we say are important. One of the most important things in change management is what we call early victories. Things that you establish and say they're about to happen, and then they show us that, okay, we're going in other directions. When the president came in and started talking about Boko Haram initially, I remember saying that it was important. I remember I was here on the day of the inauguration. I said, it's important, but my worry about Boko Haram is that it's not a short-term victory. It's something that you do for the longer term, because you never can wipe out that kind of thing in a short while. But more importantly, we needed to set out targets that we wanted to set out. For example, when the government came in and says, within the next 100 days, within the next 3 months, within the next 6 months, the refineries will be running. The reason why the refineries will be running will be, this is part of our agenda to do this concerning the nation. You see, when they get into that level, what then happens is that the people say, fine, okay, we now see where we're going. We're improving our energy levels. We're improving our fuel levels because we want industry to grow. And then it becomes part of a narrative which the people can buy into.
It's interesting that you use the refinery example, because I think it was just yesterday that the NNPC GMD did say that the refinery in Port Harcourt is now back online, producing about 5 million litres.
Yes.
But refining about 5 million litres, I think. Or
yes, something like that.
Yeah, 5 million litres of petrol per day, I think he said. And it was also talking about what the refineries will be able to refine when put together. Well, some people will say that, you know, perhaps a government doesn't need to say in clear terms. If the government, or if the people look to the government, they can by themselves deduce where it is that a leader is going. Do you think that a government has to say clearly, or do you think that if they say, or if they just behave in such a way, the people understand that this is what is expected of us, and this most likely is where a government is headed?
In the real world, in that the government has to say it. The reason is because the people do not have the energy or the time or the means to start a research process on government developments. And the time it takes for those things to trickle out to the people and also make sense. See, it's not just, I mean, for example, the president appointed a group managing director of NNPC and Dr. Kachiku. But I had to go and do a search to find out that he had been executive vice chairman of ExxonMobil. I didn't have to go and do a search. Let me put it this way. The government is responsible to me, not the other way around. I'm the people.